Now, jobs we know are going to be at the centre of this budget. It's a good plan, isn't it, to have more jobs?
Oh, having jobs is incredibly important. Having secure jobs is important too. And while you hear the government talk about unemployment, you'll never hear them talk about underemployment. Let's not forget, when you say how many people are either looking for work or looking for more hours, we get to a figure approaching 2 million Australians. And one of the things that often gets lost in the unemployment debate is the moment you're working an hour a week, you're counted as employed. There will be a lot of people who had permanent secure jobs before the pandemic and are moving onto insecure jobs where they don't get enough hours on the other side of the pandemic. So it's going to be a bit early to be celebrating some of these statistics. The fact that people are getting into the workforce is good, but underemployment and insecure employment are a huge problem in this country. And they also stand in the way of people having the confidence to spend, which is essential to being able to have the economic growth that the nation needs.
And part of that complexion of our economy is really a shift in the way people work. Perhaps it's part of the digital platforms as well that we see. So how would you address underemployment? Because there's not one silver bullet here, is there?
Oh, you're absolutely right on that, and you need a suite of policies. Now, I put our policies that I'll give directly, but I put them against what the government has described in terms of low wages growth being a deliberate design feature of how this government has managed the economy. That's their words, not mine.
What are you
how do you deal with this?
Who said that?
Matthias Cormann. Matthias Cormann, as Finance Minister, had described low wages growth as a deliberate design feature of the plans that the government had for the economy, and they've delivered on it. 6 out of 6 budgets, what they projected on wages growth has come in under, between 15 and 25% under every single year. So Josh Frydenberg talking today about, wages growth is going to be the answer. We've seen this movie before with this government. If you don't support the policies that deliver wages growth, you don't get wages growth.
And what are those policies? How do you increase wages without doing it artificially?
Yeah, there's a series of policies, some of which are in industrial relations, others go to other areas. In industrial relations, really simply, a same job, same pay policy stops labour hire and outsourcing from being used as a way to deliberately undercut wages. If you've got wages being undercut from a rate that otherwise exists at a site, you've got wages going down rather than up. Huge issue in central Queensland, for example. We talked about it last week in this interview with the mining sector, but it goes much broader than that in terms of the impact of labour hire undercutting wages growth. Similarly, you referred earlier to the gig economy. Having minimum standards within the gig economy and allowing the Industrial Commission to set them stops there from being a terrible race to the bottom. There will be people in the exact situation I described on 1 or 2 hours a week where those jobs are in the gig economy and they're not even achieving the minimum wage in those jobs, yet in the unemployment statistics they're appearing as new jobs. And you can then also go outside of my portfolio to using the power of government to be able to both be a model employer and to use secure employment in its own procurement policies. Let's not forget, a whole lot of the companies that are involved in government procurement, if they have to be good employers and prioritising secure work to be able to get government contracts, that will ricochet through their whole operations. And if people have secure work and if people have decent wage growth, they have the confidence to invest, the confidence to spend. And that's what the economy needs to be able to grow.
There's artificial ways to do this, or perhaps that's the wrong term, but with government intervention, yes, you can push up wages growth by changing policy. But how can you see the market sorting this out?
Well, effectively, if you take away some of the things that I've described, so for example, you have a same job, same pay policy, what you're doing is you're allowing competition to happen within the wages market that drives wages up. You're allowing workers to be able to negotiate for pay increases without those pay increases constantly being undercut after an agreement's been given. You allow the good employers to not feel that by virtue of them going to a better deal for their workforce, that they're immediately going to be at a disadvantage every time they tender for a government contract, being undercut by some rogue operator who's willing to treat their workforce in an appalling fashion. So you take away, like at the moment, it's geared, and that's why I started with that quote from Matthias Cormann. It's geared at the moment in the opposite direction. There are deliberate policies right now that are the reason that for 6 budgets in a row, the wage growth projections haven't come true. And they've always been wrong in terms of wage growth being lower. And when you take every year 15% below, 25% below, 6 budgets in a row, over the course of 8 long years of this government, that at the next election is going to be asking for 12 years, the cumulative impact of that is simple. Households don't have as much money to be able to spend as they should have. And that's a deliberate decision of the policies that this government has implemented. And of all the different complaints I'll have about announcement and delivery, can I say on wages growth, it is extraordinary. Because every time they make an announcement like Josh Frydenberg's going to make today, and every time workers have come out shortchanged.
Well, I won't argue with the political argument that Matthias Cormann so neatly delivered to you in that interview last year, because that interview was with me on this very program. I would say that it's a slight misrepresentation of what he was trying to say or what he did say there. He basically argued that it was a product of the economic instruments at the time. But wages growth was
still
a problem.
It still came true, Laura. Whatever we want to say about his rhetoric,
it came true. Wages growth was still a problem under Labor, was it not, when you were last in power?
Oh, wages growth is something that is a continued challenge, but we've never had a situation of what we've had this time, of the continued undercutting of wages growth. Like at the moment for the year, we're tracking at 1.4. Where the projection in the last budget was 2.5 in
sure,
that
but
order.
What would you expect it to be tracking at during a pandemic?
Well, it was during the pandemic when they issued the last projection. I don't see how they can use the pandemic as an excuse.
In my EFO or in the budget?
In the middle of a pandemic. The last budget figures that were introduced there. The budget last year was delayed because of the pandemic. It was delivered during the pandemic. They'll use the pandemic for a whole lot of excuses, but I don't see how they use it as an excuse for wages growth once again falling short of what they projected, as it has every single budget they've delivered, including the one they delivered during the pandemic. Well,
we'll see what these next projections are. I'll be very interested to see them, given that we kind of have a bit of a clearer path out of this pandemic. But finally, before I let you go, aged care. It's a big impost on the budget. How would Labor pay for it?
Oh, look, we'll see the government's response here. So that's not something that I'm going to be able to
but you know the problems, they're obvious.
It's
very expensive. Would you have some kind of levy?
No. As I say, the issue of the response to the Royal Commission and the methods of paying for it is something that I'll leave to others. That's not going to be dropped out now. But what I will say is this. The cost to older Australians of neglect for so long is unacceptable. And that cost is something where they can't be shortchanged again. OK, we'll see in the budget. We'll speak to you soon. Tony Burke, thanks. See ya.